Family business makes no sense. So let's talk about it.
Hello, I'm John Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, and I'm back with part 2 of the introduction to my series of videos which are titled Family Business Makes No Sense. In the first part of the introduction, I explained why my focus is on the fact that if family business makes no sense, but you're going to go and do it anyway, how on earth do you make it work? And I suggested in the first part of the introduction that it's all a function of applying family business best practice to the way you operate and the way you professionalize the way you operate your family and your business. This second part of the introduction, part B, is defining our context. And the broad context in which the next 50 videos will proceed will be looking at the individual causes of conflict. You'll note that I'm talking about causes of conflict, not symptoms. And I'll explain what I mean in those various videos about that. But essentially, what we are trying to do is put things in place with best practice that will prevent and avoid conflict arising in the family and in the business as early as possible. And if we haven't been able to do that, I will be attempting to explain why you're getting the outcomes you're getting in your family and in your business, because you haven't adequately dealt with those conflict causes and you have now got tensions or all-out conflict or something in between. There are still things that you can do, things that you must have the courage to do, or you risk the failure of both the family and the business. So let's talk about what is conflict. Conflict in its simplest sense is a clash. It's an opposition of views, opinions, needs, interests, ideas. You get two or more people who care enough about something to feel conflicted and then typically introduce some action because they're driven by emotion which acts out that conflict. That can be fisticuffs, it could be all out international war. In our context, it's usually destructive behaviours focused at individuals or sometimes even towards the family and or the business. Because one of the sad things is that if we have a family member who is severely unhappy, they may well weaponize their conflict to draw in the whole family or the whole business, because the only thing that really bothers them is the angst that they are feeling. And being in a family business gives them an opportunity of impacting both the family and a business and finding potential allies in all sorts of places to help them. So we're proceeding on the basis that conflict is a clash and that every conflict has an origin somewhere in the past. Usually when we see an aggressive response or an angry response, it is not the catalyst that has created it, it's the whole history of things that have led to that outburst. For ordinary, rational, sensible, reasonably calm people, the conflicts that we see in a family business are playing out things that went wrong or were perceived to go wrong, sometimes decades beforehand. So I can find myself working with family members who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and if we unpack the reason why they have always been in some form antagonistic to each other and now can't by themselves control their conflict, we end up going back to childhood. We end up going back to parenting styles. We end up going back to who got the new bicycle for Christmas and who got the hand-me-down clothes. It seems crazy. And if it can be recontextualized and change perspectives, everybody sees it as crazy and they can normally deal with it. But you've got to do the unpacking and go back before you can deal with the present to go forward. So that's what we're talking about with conflict. Conflict in itself is not a bad thing. It stimulates people emotionally and it indicates that they care enough about something to react. Now, if they control their reaction and the environment is a relatively controlled environment, then there's a good chance that there will be a robust problem workout leading to a good outcome. But if the individuals involved do not have the skills to negotiate or to problem solve, if the environment is too antagonistic or too competitive, because that's the culture of the organisation or the family, then that conflict can become all-pervading and incredibly destructive. An awfully large number of family members that I've had to work with over the years in their family business context have been on suicide watch. Just as an indication of how serious this thing can get. We've had many people who have turned around and effectively divorced the family. Their parents will never see their grandchildren. They have no relationship with their siblings or their cousins. And arguably, the family business has created the utter disintegration of the family. We don't want that to happen. So we want to look at what causes can there be, how do we prevent them growing from small causes into conflicts, and even if they have become conflicts and nobody can see the way forward, we need to understand there is always a solution if people are willing to work on it. And there are things we can usually do to get people inside the tent working on the problem. So the next 50 videos, yes, 50, each one will deal with a common cause of conflict. I'll be using a short case study in many cases to give a quick illustration, because they are all based on many real life experiences, not just one. Many real life experiences with real families from very small to very large, where ultimately, quite often when we do have a successful conflict workout, the family sits there and says, so what was the big deal? What was this all about? Because we've dismantled the causes, the reasons for them being in conflict, and from an adult perspective, whatever kicked it off 40 years ago is now relatively trivial. Hence, my most important qualification is my MBO, which stands for Master of the Bleeding Obvious, because frequently a family will get to the point where they say, so what did you do? Well, we help them deal with a problem that had been festering for sometimes decades in a way that was sufficiently low key that they didn't feel as though they went through the ringer getting it resolved. But they did at least have the courage to recognize they had a problem, they had to do something about it. So, buckle up and join me for this ride, and I hope in the process I will help you to either avoid or resolve whatever challenges and problems and conflicts you're facing in your family business. Thanks for watching.